This meeting is being recorded.
Sounds like you did the thing.
That's better. I'm on my new computer, in case you didn't know.
It already feels like the meeting itself is more powerful.
Yes. Answering an email about the software. So I think I mentioned that the Vision version of Author isn't good. It broke after update 2.
Nice.
They will not let me withdraw only that. I would have to withdraw every single one.
You have to talk to Team Apple about
it. I'm trying. Yeah, that's back and forth email, just a sentence to them. Boom, go away. Right. There's no one else joining us today. I would have thought at least Peter would be here. Mark is coming down from upstairs in a minute. I hear him creaking away.
I don't know if people are like already. I think everybody has a Thanksgiving agenda, at least here in the US, but outside, I don't know.
This is true. This is true. Well, here's Mark. Hey, Mark.
Good morning.
It's only the 3 of us so far today.
Right.
Only the 3 of us so far today.
It's quite interesting. I tried out the new screensaver thing. It's interesting on mine that whatever I set it to, it does color cycling. Not that it really matters. Yeah, yeah. Because I thought that's odd. So I looked up and sure enough, it can set a color. But I set it sort of dark gray, and it always starts at green. So I thought, not that I matter. It's not, it's not my major. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. So the exciting experiment of today, at least for me, is I'm using whole leaf tea.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because tea tends to eat away at the enamel of my teeth.
All right, yeah.
And it seems like whole leaf doesn't do that.
Oh, yes, of course. I'm thinking it's, in fact, I was just speaking with Elizabeth at home.
Right.
Saying, oh, I know what time it is because this is normally the time we do a call.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Chris, we all kind of forgot that today is Monday. A bit of, we should probably be on the channel, and we're staying at a really lovely B&B, as you can see from the background there. I'll show you
Yeah, that's cool.
It's so wonderful. So we booked breakfast at 8. And,
wow.
Look how great this place is.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Proper Americana. We do expect an episode of Murder, She Wrote at any minute. And the symposium went well, but I'll let Mark and Fabienne talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, I dunk my
Good to hear. Yeah.
No, I actually went very well. And actually the videos will be, I think they're going to be available, fairly shortly.
And on.
But some really interesting talks actually. As ever with feature text across the piece.
Okay.
Well,
I'll just put it.
No, I can come back. Have a
okay.
Sorry.
These are crustless little quiche Lorraines with a couple cheeses. I'm baking for dinner.
We should have
Sorry.
muted that. Sorry,
Yes.
guys, you're going to be jealous. We apologize. But Ted does
Thank
take
you.
very
Yeah.
good care of us.
Yeah. So
I guess Carl is still in transport. He left really early this morning. I know Deanie, because of all the time she's taken for the symposium, had to do university things today.
mhm.
Yeah, Fabian, do you want to give a quick trip report, maybe?
Sure. So actually, that's why also I wanted to join this morning, despite seeing quite a few of you yesterday and the day before. It's because I think it's interesting to step back a bit. That's also where I jolted some little notes. So yeah, to me it went quite well. It was quite interesting as per usual, with a bit of like different perspective from XR to blockchain to VR and AI. I do recommend, by the way, I'll try to put in the chat the can buy covering of the event, like a couple of photos and a short description for the talks. What though was most interesting for me was obviously the demo and being able to have, I don't know, 5-10 people basically try some of the most recent work. Students or professor, I mean, a bit of a range of every kind of any kind of people who could come and that had the time. It was also a bit funny because I started and at the very beginning of demo, everybody's a bit shy, and then we literally had to be kicked out of the room at the end, and quite a few people were not able to try. So that's always a bit of a shame, but it's a good problem to have. The main feedback, let's say, I can share about the doing the demo. First, the very positive one is people get it. I think it made sense. The feedback was positive. And some of the, I want to say the beyond just like, oh, it's nice or it's interesting, or like the jaw dropping wow, especially for people who never tried VR or AR, was okay. Now that it works and I get it, how do I bring my files? So literally my files, my whatever I'm working on.
Exactly. It was so perfect, Fabian.
And but one of the thing is, some of it is like literally the files, if they are supported, which is easy. For example, if you bring your PDF or a text file or a bit of code for the right programming language. What is less easy is one specific comment where somebody asked for Illustrator files. So I do have an SVG import solution in place. What I don't is, and I think that's the deeper part, let's say, of the feedback. Once you have a file, pretty much always people want some of the content of the file to be manipulated differently. Like, for example, if I go back to Illustrator, it would be the different layers of a drawing. For PDF, it might be, for example, having the text readable, yes, as it I hope is now, but also the images, for example, the figures of a paper. So there were a couple of examples like this. I do have, for example, figures of PDF on the side, but I don't have, for example, layers or different strokes on Illustrator. But I think basically, to go back of a discussion we do from time to time on mereology, like what's the level we want to reach? Is it the file? Is it the directory with the files? Is it different part of a single file? Where do we stop basically? And I think, yeah, the highlight was stopping at the file itself for a lot of cases is not sufficient. It wasn't, I'm not shocked by this suggestion or this request, let's say. But it's good that it's not like us, let's say, fantasizing about it. It's an actual need from potential users that they would be excited by it. But if it's just a flat file, and I think Bob also with his poster did mention it a few times. So yeah, I want to say that's the biggest takeaway I would have, that it has been confirmed quite a few times. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. Can I just interject something briefly, Fabian?
Please do.
I can see that as a wish. I can see that as being useful, and that's very good feedback. But also, I don't think what you showed so far really shows something like a knowledge graph or something like that, where you basically do need just the tiny little bits. So it really highlights the different kinds of uses. Is the sticky notes, knowledge graph? Is it a memory palace? Is it a presentation space? Is it an Illustrator workspace? And I think over time, we will make it more clear what the different use cases are for the different availability of your own data.
I'd also add one thing. I think listening to your comment about people wanting to see something inside the file, and the fact that if they're sitting in their desktop system, that and I'm less up to date on sort of a pure Linux system, but on a Windows or Mac system, there's normally some sort of preview. I know on the Mac there's kind of a quick look you can and but that's something that apps have essentially had to evolve over time. So some very generic things the operating system will do for other things. So I think that's a really interesting aspect to bring out to this. So this is something in the sense that almost goes back to the likes of something like Adobe, is they need to think about whether what they or whether they're building in a sense more accessible previews that i.e. stuff that's not designed really for use inside the app, but is designed for this interstitial stage as you move away from a presumption that the only time you meet the file is, say, on your normal computer laptop, your normal computer environment.
Well,
so it's not like yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just it's something that is actually already in there. Namely that on Linux specifically, but I imagine on other OS, but I don't know and I don't really care to be very that blunt with you, as you know. But on Linux, there is a cross-window manager kind of standard. I don't remember I don't think it's a standard proper, but basically GNOME and KDE and others agreed that there is a certain directory in your home directory for generated thumbnails. So it means that whatever you're using, if you take the hash of the path of the file, you can look up if the thumbnail exists. And if it does, you can use it. Any software can use it. And that's something I already implemented. So it means if I open the directory on my file browser on my desktop, it will, if the files are supported, but quite a few are, for example, PDF, SVG, PPT, ODG, movie files, even Blender, like 3D models can have also like a perspective preview. And when they're present, basically I copy them and I use them. The problem is when you do the preview, yes, pretty much as Chris was putting on the chat, the cached thumbnail, and I'll put a link also on the specs themselves, but it's actually quite efficient because if they exist, one just has to take them or copy them. The problem is quite a few there, like the layout files, they don't have preview unless I generate them myself, which I do, but it means a lot of people who did try to experience, they see, for example, I want to say 20 icons, and they see preview for maybe one or two. So quite often they don't even notice. But for the PDF, it is there. So it is definitely something it's in place. It's not sufficient. I think, Frode, also you suggested that if, for example, there is metadata about the document, for example, the number of page of a PDF, the thickness or the depth, let's say, of the icon might represent the number of pages. I think there are quite a few things that invite us to go beyond the flat thumbnail. But at least, let's say, the visual of what is the content in that kind of intermediary stage of going to potentially open that file or work with that file. There is a technical solution and some of it is already in there. Does it make sense?
An interesting thing about the thumbnail in terms of, I suspect the people who are sort of missing the thumbnail the most are those who probably work in whatever system, but effectively in their Explorer, Finder, whatever equivalent, whatever operating system they use, that if you're someone who's used to basically working with rectangle file icons that are sufficient size that they, for instance, can be shown with a thumbnail instead of, say, the host application used to open that thing, then it creates an expectation of the thumbnail. But if we mine inside, in other words, the fact that the thumbnail is not there may be an artifact to the fact they're just used to seeing a thumbnail. It's not that they necessarily need it. It's that they're confused when they don't see something they expect to see. Because I think the really interesting thing is, and you alluded to it earlier, is actually what do you actually sort of need to know about the file? So rather than just seeing a picture because that's nice and we like pictures and they tell us something, but actually it might be that you might want to know sort of how long it is. I mean, almost depending on the type of file, there might be information that you really want tellback in the environment you're in as to what it is.
Yeah.
You're not going to, in the environment that, for instance, you built about, you're not actually going to directly edit an Illustrator file there. You will, in due course, you'll be able to probably natively use Illustrator inside some sort of XR space. Not today, but possibly in the future. But that's sort of the way things might go. So the question becomes, when I'm in this sort of file exploration space or document exploration space, what might I need or want to do? And I don't think I know the answer to this. And I mean, I'm sure we'd all rush to have an answer, but I suspect it's more subtle than that. And I'm sure it will vary broadly by not necessarily by individual file type, but more the class of object, whether it's pure data or it's a textual object or it's a diagram or something like
that. I also
one
after you, I'd love to respond. Yeah, sorry.
One important takeaway on that topic specifically. Well, there are two. Number one, I hope at least I highlighted during my presentation, and when the few people who tried had this request of basically more files that I don't support now, like saying it's open source, saying the architecture is there, and suggesting, for example, to Dini, if it's possible, if it fits within the Sloan to make a workshop so that students who, and I think maybe I mentioned it to both of you already, Mark and Frode, that like they are weird files to me because they're not part of my workflow. But the whole thing about being open and trying to foster interoperability is not to say, hey, I'm going to implement this on your behalf. It's do your best to try to implement it. We might help also if need be, but like we grow the number of files, and again, because it's combinatorial, it means the system itself and people participating to it can do so much more. On that, what was interesting is that Dini's colleague, I can't remember her name, but she asked during a presentation, not mine, but she asked, what about basically supplemented materials? You have a PDF, but for example, if you're a biologist, you might have Python code and you might have DNA formatted a certain way, etc. And definitely not my expertise, as you know. But I do think in terms of the future of text, and regardless of XR, if you can manipulate not just the paper itself, which is like a flat, fixed version of it, but the content that was used to think about what the PDF says, I find it so much more exciting. So I try to answer to her, but basically going back to the workshop and supporting more file, to me, that's an ideal use case. That's definitely something I'm excited by, and I think it would fit, basically.
I think that is much more exciting. I think you're talking about Christine, who was a vice chancellor or dean, or a very, very important position, and a really clever and lovely lady. So yeah, absolutely. Now, going back to the student saying they want to be able to have a preview of an Illustrator file, I don't really think that's a massive priority, because when you get in that environment and all you experience is kind of a desktop level, of course you want more information about your things. However, as Mark was asking, what kind of things, for what reasons? When I open an author document, currently it basically goes by date or title, or date and title. That I don't have preview of author documents. I would like to have previews of author documents, including what you mentioned, Fabienne, of showing the size, because then I could easily see, is this an article or just some notes? Right. I would also very much like to have a more interesting timeline that we talked about. And one thing we may also think about is encoding the location of where something was first made and where it was edited. Because then you could look at the maps, like this is the stuff I discussed when I was in Portland, having coffee with somebody, that kind of stuff. So lots of attributes of the documents, absolutely. Being able to see what's inside them, medium. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying in terms of that. And then finally, Fabian, Christine's situation, it is a bit ridiculous today how badly connected things are. This is, of course, why in Reader, I use document name addressability, so you can open things that now also an author. So I think we should look at fulfilling the issue there. If you have a PDF, it's got things that are mentioned in there that are associated. Don't hide it. Make Ted Nelson lines or something to make it available. Really, really cool. Fabian, your turn.
Yes, I think it's important to distinguish, let's say, I don't know if that's what you call inside and outside during your presentation, but to me, if would it be this, like the thumbnail and the metadata is the outside, and for example, the layer of an Illustrator file is the inside? Is this what you meant, or is it something else?
Okay, that's a really good question, and I don't know. So in my presentation, I had inside outside in the sense of the outside is basically currently in my model just the title, nothing else. And then below that, there's a big text area, can be inserted here, including links to documents. We probably need to have a better definition of inside outside, including what is the icon and what are the connections that are really useful for this document, for example. I don't know.
So my gut feeling about this is I need to sketch it. So for example, I imagine a cone of at the bottom, the content of the files, for example, the bits or bytes, and then a higher level, which is, for example, the layers of what's the name? An Illustrator file or Inkscape file, whatever. And then on top of it, maybe the entire file, and on top of it, the thumbnails and other metadata. And I think if it's visualized, it might even be something that is an affordance, so that the person would, like a kind of zoomable interface, either leaning forward or using hands to go through, but choose the right level that they need to interact with. And I think just kind of formalizing it, is the visual, not necessarily as a prototype directly, but that could be interesting.
I thought on two of the points you've raised. One is this one about, it's absolutely right. It's absolutely not your, in a sense, a task that I think you should take upon yourself to say, can I support all these things? I would think of it a different way around, to say, I'm making a space in which I understand that people might want more and different information than essentially just a picture of a sort as the enrichment of that symbol in the space, that object in the space. So the question sort of becomes, how do I, as I design it, is to make sure what limitations or what edges am I putting in? In other words, trying to leave it open so that there is something where you can do this. So if you are a vendor with a particular file type, or you are a certain sort of use case group of people, you might want a particular thing. And my expectation in an open source system is those people would then go away and build that enrichment, essentially as a plugin to the environment, and they would do it for the purpose that they need it for. And then that absolves you of the requirement to do it for them. The responsibility, therefore, is to really say, as one goes, is to be mindful of, am I sort of doing something now that implies a literal limitation? And it doesn't matter if one does, it's recording it, because not everyone knows everything. So it helps people massively if they can find out at the outset that essentially the environment they're going to design something in actually doesn't support a thing they might want to do, and they might need to do it a different way. I think that's massively helpful, and I think that's a sort of communitaire type approach to doing it, and gets you away from having to do things. On the other point about Christine, when she said, when they were saying, well, I have this associated file. Well, to me, that's what linked data is there for.
Exactly.
If the it's not, and it's not even a matter of sort of whether it's visual meta or something else. In fact, linked data is more robust and wider and already more widely supported. It's something we should sort of engage in, and it doesn't run against any of the things we're doing at the moment. That means that a document can go away, find the Python file, and if you want to take the sort of the Alan Kay's or Smalltalk approach, well, if the environment supports running the simulation that Python script, for sake of argument, shows, well, there's no reason it can't be done. Again, not the task of what you're doing, but it's basically, I think, so it's actually educating people as to how to responsibly, well, not responsibly, how to
You have regular sugar.
meaningfully use
This is Splendor.
their documents
You do?
in that
Thank you.
space, if that makes sense.
Thank you
Go
very
ahead,
much.
Fabian.
Sorry, guys.
No, I was a little bit confused by some noise in the background.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to run past that again?
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No.
My tea.
It's okay. No, because I think it's kind of touching on the point I was putting in the chat also, as you said. It is, I think one way to do that is basically to do, let's say the next time I need to add, just for my own pleasure, or because we believe it's useful, another file type.
Yeah.
I don't know, let's say .py for Python, let's say, because that's what we mentioned a few times. Or rather, when I add it, I can take the specific commit on how the code repository was changed. And as it was changed, I can put the right comment so that somebody else, could be Mark or Cole or Chris, that wants another file, where to do it. What they would then do is a pull request to say, hey, I added another file format, which is, I don't know, .go for another programming language they prefer for the source file. And as they do this, I think that's a big milestone in the sense that when I see a framework and I see it does impressive things, but I see only the author of it does it, it's kind of scary. It's like, well, maybe nobody gets it or understand, or it's super complicated. It doesn't mean it's good. Maybe it's actually good, but only for that person. And as soon as there is one person outside of the project, let's say, or the main author, the lead dev that is going to do it, suddenly it's like, oh, it's reachable. It's something that can be done. And I think that would be a great milestone, eventually documenting the process that somebody else discovering the project and wanting to make it grow, how they manage, or also all the way they did fail, so failure in documentation or technical problem. I think that would be really helpful in terms of making that grow. Why do I insist also a little bit is by doing a pull request or the plugin kind of system Mark you were suggesting is it then begs the question of curation. Is there like a centralized way to accept or reject plugin, to have to kind of federate how it's done so that there are more than one place where they are hosted and eventually usable? I think it becomes interesting because, for example, if a couple of students from DINI do need that, the whole point of having it, and again as open source, is that somebody else in Japan or in New Zealand or in Brussels needs it, they're not going to do it again because it's complex, maybe it's not their expertise. But if it's federated and kind of like promoted, hey, there is a new kind of file supported with or without like the depth kind of discussed before, with thumbnails, with metadata, etc., just like working as an image, I think that's already that would already foster quite a bit of potential contribution and more interoperability.
Yes, this is okay. By the way, morning, Andrew. You said you'd be late. Very glad you're here. Much more of a discussion than expected. It's based on Fabian getting feedback from students saying we need to be able to open more files, like Illustrator, or rather show preview of. And now we're kind of stepping back a little bit, looking at kind of the pyramid of data in an object, where the top is just the name and the bottom is the raw data, and the middle you have degrees of what we can access. Fabian, on the point of plugins, really interesting. One thing I really like is on the Mac, if you open a file and it doesn't have that, it can say, do you want us to search the App Store to see if it's available? I think we should try to have something like that, where if you make a plugin, somehow you need to be able to describe what it's for. So if someone tries to use something, they search based on their own use case. Fabian, your hand is up already. I haven't even started talking yet. Okay, I have a bigger point. So Fabian and Mark, please go ahead.
Yes, I think it's also not necessarily very difficult. Indeed, if it's like the right, for example, field, let's say the file name or kind of convention, especially as right now, it's mostly on the client side, more on the companion, but by the fact of just being file, one can imagine whatever, let's say Python or .x, .py, plugin, .json, and that itself would be one way to support a new file, and then in it there will be the code itself on how to support it. A couple of tests, for example, and metadata. So, example, what are the files in and out, or the file type, MIME types, etc., that it can support. So, I think as is the extensibility via plugin, it sounds that it's rather coherent with the current architecture. I don't think it would be like a big rehole or a big problem. And then storing, let's say, a .py, .plugin, .json on any website, it means it could be loaded via URL. So there could be also like a view on a website that puts that not as a raw JSON, but as a way that is readable for somebody who is not technical. So I think it, like, just by saying it aloud, I think it's quite straightforward. And again, sorry, just one last thing, because sorry, I do think of it as I say it. It means if there is such a file, a .py, .plugin, .json hosted on a website, and with a web view, or a view rather as a web page to see it from a non-developer person, there can also be like a remix button that say, hey, I copy that file, and then the person who wants to support, let's say the .go, .plugin, .json file, would change a little bit. The structure would still be the same, like the mandatory fields and all, but then it means the onboarding to the addition of a plugin that is roughly based on an existing one would be much, much easier. So that kind of would solve the part of the documentation of adding support for another file mentioned earlier. That would make it much faster, because instead of being just raw documentation that is abstract and somebody need to read and interpret, that would be the tooling, let's say, or the scaffolding in order to support all files.
But I have a thing. I think complementary this. I mean, I think I glibly I use the word plugin in a rather trite way. Because I'm not necessarily formally thinking of that structure. Really, what's inherent in what's being said here is to reinterpret the whole concept of folders and files. Because in a sense, what you have is a data object. Now, we're used to seeing that as a sort of rectangle on screen. We're just going to move in next door.
I'm just following you.
Oh, I see. Well, and so we're used to seeing that's our sort of cultural expectation. But in effect, we're looking at a data object. I mean, okay, say a Word file is actually a zip file folder masquerading as a single document. So it's happening already. You know, it's just a bit of theatre that hides the performance. So if you embrace that concept, really what's talking about, in order to see the thing that you want and to do a certain amount of minor interaction with the object without opening it in its full editing environment, is to turn that on its head and say, don't think in terms of files and folders, think in terms of data objects whose surface layer of metadata allows you to interact with that. And then you can, and then I think things get a lot more flexible. Because, for instance, if you embrace the sort of general concept of linked data, then the file, what we'd call the file or the document now, can self-explain and say, well, I need this, or I need this particular script. So instead of the formality of a plugin per se, it can go and say, right, go dereference this, and this will give you the information to basically navigate to what you need. I know that rests upon a notion of an open and available internet, but I think that's sort of where we're living at the moment. So then, but that is the potential limitation. But nonetheless, I think that's really interesting for the design of the documents. And it's interesting in what we're doing, because I think it's a point that you can put out for people who are working in the constraints of a commercial environment, where they say, yeah, but I've still got to sell stuff to people, to say that's fine. But going forward, if you want to leverage the opportunities of this sort of environment, then you ought to perhaps think in these terms. And it's not radical. You're only going to effectively be reskinning the information you have. And in many cases, you're just surfacing a lot of useful metadata that's there already that you just can't get because it's hidden in a zip file or something. Yeah. So I think this is a very positive movement, actually, and it leads on to a much more flexible and much richer interaction across the surface layer of what we currently call documents, without having to always dive down into a full editing environment to do anything with it.
Okay, Fabian, then it's my turn.
So one of the argument about why, for example, also Freud, you asked a couple of times where you were pushing for arguing in a very interesting fashion for knowledge objects, and I'm still pushing back on files in the very boring sense. Because they exist, and I think very few people have, at least in the community, have doubt about what a file is. So I think that was why I was like insisting on this so much. It doesn't mean it has to be limited to this, but it's been very fruitful for now. So whenever something is very fruitful, I did not show it during the presentation, but I have like a couple of visualization of my kind of personal KPI, which is like number of ideas per day. And that on that front, that KPI has been really high. That's been, and it's not really slowing down. So I like, until it's not slowing down, I'd rather not give up on this. It doesn't mean it's like it has to be just this, but by unrolling, let's say, this idea of plugin and seeing that it still fits, I don't really want to give up on it. It doesn't mean not supporting document or different way to go through, but yeah.
My turn. You Mark, have agreed on a lot. First of all, I agree on that. I'm really happy with the notion of files. In a way, that is a knowledge object, and I'm very happy with what Mark just said. There is a lot in the basic desktop file for a lot of files. You open the contents, you can unzip before you get to the proprietary stuff even. So I think the term knowledge object is just a bit sexier for people. At least when I've been testing the term with people, you have knowledge objects in space. By the way, they can be your files. Now, what I've been really raring to say is this is the level that I really want to start designing icons in this space. Not the icons themselves, but how they can be visually interacted with. This is something I've been working on for 20 years, if not longer. I had a website called appleblunders.com. Where I did this thing this was with System 8, which was just inconsistent in interface. For instance, what you mentioned of depth, if it's a bigger object, these are the things we can now start to make happen for people. Other things we can do is if you give attention to, through selecting, pointing, whatever we might choose to be appropriate, what is the reveal? As on the Mac, the quick look, touch the spacebar. Those reveals can be actions. They can also be further information. They could, for instance, show the icon of the person who sent you the file in one specific corner. Maybe another corner could show you the icon where you have sent the file to. Maybe it could show you where you have published the files. You remember, oh yeah, I've already worked with that one. It could also have information about associated data and metadata, like we talked about a few minutes before Brandel joined us. Like Christine wants the associated data for her scientific files. That could be shown at that point. So the idea of this being icons, and we can put more stuff in there. And then visually, they are very, very simple when you move them around in the space. But even the simplicity can change. Let's say you pull out and there's 100,000 files. You may not want to see the name. You may not want to see the preview. You may want to see a color based on some criteria. This then becomes possible because of that pyramid that you described, Fabian. So that is absolutely fantastic. So I hope we can start even sketching iconic representations, but also before I go, Brandel, we also talked about, of course, timeline, and additionally, spatial. Where did you edit this file? When the system gives permission to store that kind of stuff, we can start doing that. Yeah, it's exciting.
So sorry, I'm stepping in. Just it's going to be super quick. It's because I want one of the reasons also.
I haven't heard from you for a while. Welcome.
Yes, here this morning specifically is because I don't want to lose the feedback of people who were there yesterday, or 2 days ago actually. You see, I'm already losing it. So I think it's super precious because it's more than, it goes beyond us and our both desires and assumption. And one on files specifically, not knowledge object, there might be, but here it was people quite a few times where like when I did the I drop the file on this blue target on the right, and then it opens the file itself on another device, for example, the phone or the laptop, and people have the actual files. Pretty much every time that was a wow moment. They were pleasantly surprised, I want to say. I'm not arguing on why and everything. I'm just saying that's the positive feedback also on, hey, we're not stuck in there. Basically, it's like, oh, we have the thing, and now we move on or we do whatever. It's not, but so that was also some very raw, let's say, feedback that happened. I don't want to say every time, but probably close to that. That worked quite well.
It makes a
It
lot
was
of
well
sense.
received.
That makes a lot of sense. Wait, that's what you want to put in? Yeah, well, that's great because that is really core to what this whole thing is. Thank you. Obviously, Brandel, quick before someone else.
Oh, Fabian puts his hand up.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I'm afraid I took the opportunity during the demo time to just talk to people instead of watching things. So I don't have any feedback about things, but I promise I will look through some of the stuff more comprehensively myself to be able to generate feedback. Something that I was thinking about while you were talking about zip files is I don't know if I've mentioned, but it's fairly self-evident that like the USD zip format is just obviously a zip file. It's actually uncompressed, but that's by the by. Um, and the sort of the collection of systems that are now just a bunch of other files masquerading in one as a zip are so numerous that as a sort of a general strategy, it seems to be pretty valid to be able to do that. And something that's quite tantalizing to me as a concept is to just generate speculative composite formats of those things by virtue of zipping things that people don't know or care about up together, and then just being able to have a crack at interpreting and interposing all of the things that are inside it. So for example, with USD zip, if you don't know about 3D geometry, you still can know about all of the file formats, the image files that are inside it. So it's going to be a composite of binary data for vertex stuff, material X data file, but it's also going to have JPEGs and PNGs. Um, and you can use those if you know enough about it, and if you're careful about rezipping it, then you can undertake meaningful operations over it, and it's still a file. And so, but it also means that you can recompose ad hoc file formats over top of things that other people would have a chance at being able to kind of make partial interpretations of the contents therein, which is just super fun. So, one of the things that's interesting about a file as a closure of a specific sort of set of concerns on it, like a JPEG or a PNG or whatever, is that um, you can only represent things and operations as far as it pertains to what is relevant to the file. So, if you think a JPEG is correct, there's nothing in JPEG or EXIF. EXIF technically you could bend to telling you about that, but or if you want it to face west, like these are things that are definitely extraneous to the strict file format. But the idea that you can create these composite forms and then be relatively sort of flippant about what you mean by them, as long as the original sort of interior intent is kind of preserved with them, I think is just really interesting because it means that you could be just so much more experimental with those things and what you mean. So if you like, it's a JPEG, but it's a dumb one. It's just stupid and I hate it. Is a different sort of set of meaning that you can get to zipping things and that meta information functionally becoming part of a new composite file and being able to arbitrarily layer those things on top of each other uh, forever sounds weird, but fun for me to play with.
Absolutely. This seems to be why it makes so much sense what Fabian said about having it like a pyramid. Fabian, please. If you're still awake.
I am very much awake, sadly for you all, because I keep on putting my hand up. So I will, and even I will show that it's real me with the camera. So I put a link also in the chat.
Wow, he's well rendered.
So I put the link in the chat because it addresses 2 points. So one of the things I've done actually to address Mark, at some point you mentioned being online as a realistic assumption. Yes and no. For example, literally, I couldn't show the video sadly during the presentation, but I flew in, and when I was up there in the sky, everything worked. because I had an offline version. Also, I was proud to tell people while giving the demo, because I think they were, I mean, justifiably so, they were concerned first about how reliable that whole thing is, but in terms of privacy, we have so much different data. It's not a criticism, Mark, it's just to give the context of how things happen. So having everything that works offline, for me, feels safer, and I think also when I give demo, it does feel safer. Why I put also the link on the chat is because it's one of the ways that I solve that is namely that you work offline, but also the content itself. So normally you manipulate files on a file system, but if you're offline, you might not have access to that file system anymore. So I made basically, I put JSON in JSON, or file rather, I embed them in a big JSON, nothing special about it, but it just works. So it means I have a kind of, I called it a packed directory.json, not very creatively, but it basically gives me a virtual file system. So I have access to the content of the file, even though I don't have access to the file system anymore. So it's a way to cache, but also, for example, for demo of people that don't have the backend, the companion that they can install for whatever reason, you can still share content this way. So it's not zipped or unzipped or whatever, no optimization there. But it already, that's the kind of thing that already works. So you do have a file, but you have files in them, and it's, yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward, but that was already quite useful. And that was also something that I think people were, there was no direct feedback on it, but whenever I did clarify that it was web-based and yet offline, that was pretty positively received.
Well, I just clarify. I mean, basically, I'm going to vehemently agree with you. So it just sits there on the record in the sense that when I was referring to a fancy dereferencing thing, really what I was wanting to put into focus is a consideration that we need to foreground that there's a balance between having enough to do something meaningful, as you eloquently just described, you know, on the air flight, and the fact that you don't want, not every object needs to or can or should have everything it needs. So there's a balance, and I think that's an interesting thing for us to explore in a sense. So what meaningfully do you have to have close at hand? And for instance, that probably may vary by the type of object, the type of file that it is. I mean, what I see is really interesting here is we're back in a sense of bindings and things. So, you know, a folder, a directory is just a binding because its contents are a set of files. You know, you could think of that folder as being a shelf in a bookshelf, and the files are the books on the shelf. And what's really interesting in the context of what you've done is given a really useful environment in which to actually enrich that and unpick it. So you still have the notion of these clusters of information, things that we might think of as files.
Or knowledge objects.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, well, part of the thing is to step away from. So it's deliberately to question the sort of the notions we have at the moment. You know, what is a file? As we know in this audience, you know, it's really whatever you want it to be, because actually it's a different thing. And if you accept the truth of that, I think it opens up to saying, okay, fine, well, we don't have to firmly color within the lines of these past constraints, which were there for good reasons, but they're essentially historical constraints. So if we want to do what we want to do, it's a matter of saying, take what we have and need, and then say, what extra can we do? And it is, for instance, the thought that because you can now expose more information, you can do, say, lightweight transformations on a data object without needing a full edit. It's something we're not used to doing. It's sort of there in some of these sort of quick look systems that you have at the moment, but they've grown up by accident. And there's a chance to look at that and saying, well, is there some sense of a formalism with a very small f to put into that in terms of a guideline to make it easier for people to do more with their things? Because one take on this is to say that at the moment you see a file that has an extension that sort of tells you the world it lives in. Okay, text is very general, but something like an Illustrator file is an AI file, and you use it with Illustrator. But actually, you might be a cartoonist as opposed to someone who's doing, I don't know, industrial conduits. And I bet my bottom dollar that those people actually have a slightly different view of really what that file means, or what a drawing or a file in next. So if you take that view of it, then the interaction with the knowledge object that we're calling the AI file at the moment, there's the opportunity to actually give affordances to those different user groups who at the moment are linked by the fact that you just use one editing app. but actually doing quite different things. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity there.
Yeah. Okay, Fabian, if it's on this topic, because I'm going to change level on this particular topic. Hello, Doggy. Yeah, fully aware of you.
Yes, it is on the topic and it's going to be quick, so don't worry about it. One other feedback I received, which is going to
Oh no, if it's
shock
other
absolute.
feedback, can you pause then? Because I'm talking about exactly the same thing. Sorry,
Well, then you don't need to talk. You don't need to talk if it's the same thing.
I thought you were commenting on exactly what Mr. Mark said. Anyway, briefly, one thing
Because the feedback was basically that now it's a single directory. People want multiple directory. I mean, subdirectories is the point, that the hierarchy of files here is not present. And it's some of the feedback. Why do I say this? Is because I think when we start to say the discussion right now, I think is also about that having potentially not just more file, but the hierarchy of the file must be or considered. That's just
okay.
that.
All right, my turn. What I really think we need to do a little bit now, but also properly in the near future, is continue. Well, first of all, the main thing we have to do is continue exactly this discussion, the files, the file types, the zips, the things, the connections, all of that, no question. I think we also need to do it from a completely visual interface perspective at the same time. What I mean by that is we are throwing away some terms, around some terms, especially the whole knowledge object, without really defining it. Of course we are, right? So here's a really simple reason why I think this will be important. In author at the moment in the map, you can link to a document. Visually, the user doesn't know if that document is another author document with a map or if it's JPEG or something else. That is a real problem. And that is a visual interaction problem. That also goes to if you're in a space and over there you have the word buy chocolate, and that's all it is. That is a very shallow object. And to the right of it, you have a massive Illustrator file. The user needs to know the difference between these two things somehow. And if there's a third thing that is a link to another set of another volume, that's going to be important too. So Fabian, the last thing you just said about one level library, yes, we need to figure out how to do nesting of things. And these things will become, they have to be so visual that you look at something and what's the word? I'm sure I'll think about it when my hand is down, but you just instantly have to know what kind of object it is. Do I agree, Fabian, that we should primarily use proper files? 100%. There is so much value in that. What Mark is also saying, and I think you agree, to dig into those files, to surface it as a better kind of preview, especially when you're doing kind of a quick look type action, absolutely important. But then in this mixed environments, you're also going to, oh my God, he's doing the sideways hand, thank God. To also have relatively free floating things. Like one of the many things Dini has strongly contributed is how important annotations are. You should be able to pull out an annotation from a book, whether a pull out is an annotation or not is irrelevant, you all know what I mean, and then leave that on the side. Close the book and have a choice to keep that or not. Right, and that's literally a snippet of a thing in a room next to an Illustrator file. On the Mac desktop, we would call that cuttings, right? So there are some precedents for how to deal with it. We have an opportunity to make this environment so rich that the user doesn't have to think about the hierarchy. They just naturally knows when to go up, down, sideways, and so on. So in closing, I hope that over time, all of us can do pencil sketches or mock-ups or whatever, how we want these darn things to look, just to make it a little real so that Fabian doesn't have to code everything immediately first. Over to Brandel, quick before Fabian lifts his hand.
I'll go back down. I'm going to grab my rocks.
Okay.
So I just thinking more about files you know about and files you don't, and what computers open and what they do. And thinking a little bit about I mentioned to Mark yesterday bulk renaming tool, and he countered with easy data transform, which I absolutely love. I need to look more at it. But between things like that and Daisy Disk, if anybody's seen that before, it's this application for being able to kind of make recursive assessments of file size and capacity, because it's absolutely critical for anybody who's run out of space for any reason, which is everybody who's spent more than 6 months on a computer. And it makes me think about sort of a slight redefinitions of terms of binary files in the sense of like yes or no. Do I open this or not? And also terminal in the sense of like, am I the terminating application that actually has the ability to make sense of this file or this file composite? And it makes me think of the poverty of the sort of the action repertoires that are available to people on computers today, insofar as they, you either yeah,
Daisy.
Daisy does so beautiful. What it does for people who aren't familiar with it, and for the record, frankly, is it shows you a recursive pie chart of where all of your space is on your computer and what are the proportions within the sort of the subdomain or subdirectory that you are. And so, if you have 500 gigabytes and 250 gigabytes is in your Xcode directory, then it'll show Xcode as half of that. You drill into that and you can see that it's because you have several different simulators of iOS, macOS, Vision OS, and you can jump into those and see that there's 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and you can delete them, which is most of the job that people are doing there. But it's not necessary for you to be doing it for deleting. It's just something that's there to provide an additional view over files that it itself doesn't know much or care much about, other than that they have this universal attribute of file size. And that's really interesting because it's not a terminal format. It's not something terminating with a specific task. It's definitely something that is to shepherd and to marshal forces into other actions across the system. And so it's really interesting to think about uh, the sort of the GNU-iness of it, the small application having the ability to compose onward actions into other intentions, and the idea that a file bundle, a knowledge object, or whatever set of arrangements you might want to have, has a lot of sense in it, even when people don't care about all of it, or when they don't even know about what you can do with it. And that for the most part, the the ability to unzip a file, unzip a folder and see that there's this bunch of things in this folder and this bunch of things in this folder. They may have these modified dates, things like that. That's pretty paltry and impoverished, frankly, in terms of being able to give somebody a frame of reference of what they are going to be able to do and what kind of sense they're going to be able to make over the contents. And the web is a wrapper that has the ability for people to compose kind of opinions over it. But I do think that there's a really interesting intermediate step between full web page authoring, which is, fun for me, something that I've made a professional career out of over the last 25 years, and something that has the ability to sort of stick together, to glom up some kind of representation that has opinions about the terminal files within it, such that intermediating kind of environments and workspaces have the ability for people to make sense over the contents in some other way. So I'm going to keep playing with it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. And in a minute, Chris, if you don't mind, please read what you brilliantly put in the comments. I just wanted to add one thing, and that is foreground, background. We're talking about, and conceptually at least, the foreground elements, your own stuff, right? Then there will be a background right behind that, which, Fabian, just stop it. I have to finish this. It's funny because you're so eager. Your hand is just so much more noticeable in a very good way. Yeah, just okay. So you have your files here that you're working on right now. Of course, spatially can be different. And then you have your own files, so to speak, at another level that you should be able to instantly, visually, or interactively call upon, right? We have to figure out what that means. And also, we have the entire internet, right? You should ideally feel in this environment that anything that is accessible is instantly accessible, not through following a link and clicking and slowly. So we should ideally get to the way of looking at massively large volume representations of data in the distance. And all of these things are very visual as well as data driven, right? So when we look at how to craft, I'm going to use that word, how to craft the icon that represents something, how we craft it in a context of either time, space, or, as you say, Brandel, hugely impoverished what we get out of these little things. And then we have all these naive ideas, naive because it doesn't exist yet, of how that relates to the whole. But how do we bring that forth? Is it maybe an action of literally holding it in your hand differently? and suddenly the room Fantasia like spins around you. I don't know. But I just think it would be great to have dialogue on the object, which is a single thing, what we've been discussing, its basic environment, and the whole entire world. Okay, Fabian, I know your hand is up. Digital desktop.
Yes. So I am pretty eager because it was interesting yesterday and the day before in terms of the surprise and discussions it's led to, and one of those which was not surprising was it's like, oh, I need to reach things, and either I'm on the plane or I'm in a small confined space, because even when we had like a 2x2 or more or 3x3 area, 3x3 meter area during the demo, that was still, it always feels too small basically. And one discussion I had was about basically, I imagine most of you are familiar with the notion of screen real estate. It's how much of the screen you can actually use for things that are useful for you, and how much is not useful, and how you try to optimize for it, basically. And through the discussion with that person, I'm also going to put the link, but some of you might be familiar with Newford. So in terms of ergonomic for architecture, but it works with pretty much any other topic. But I think it works quite well if they are, was the idea of having a volume real estate. So basically you try to optimize based on the action real estate, but not for the screen, but for the virtual volume you're part of.
I'm going to hand over to Chris, but I just wanted to, on this particular thing, we need to figure out how, yeah, Mark's down here, he's getting ready to leave. Thank you. Mark, we're talking about the icons, but we also need to look at the entire internet behind it. We also need to look at your own files as an intermediary. So there's one more thing, and that is, how can we get, and I know it kind of happens in different environments, an item in the space, broadcast to the space, what it's got, right? Imagine you're a medical student and you have this amazing human model, an anatomical model. We need to figure out a mechanism where that model can say, I represent this, I have a pancreas, I have, all these data objects. So if you're in even a normal document that has, let's say, even a search function, that document can know that currently in the space, there's something that can respond to the search, right? So publish and subscribe is what Apple maybe called it a time ago.
You can do that already, in a sense, because in a sense, that's what linked data does. So, you could either have it literally as data in the form of today, you probably use JSON. If you want a bit, or you can do JSON LD, which is just linked data saved in JSON form. And I don't see that by way of a riposte at all, but in a sense that some of these things are here conceived of for different purposes. Because linked data, I think, has long been a little enclave of its own that people didn't really understood, but it begins to show its purpose, I think, here. So if you think about discoverability, and this is really at the heart of my earlier point, is saying, well, if you allow yourself to step away from the document or the file as a sort of linear descendant of the piece of paper that you used to have, or the tablet of stone, or the wax stylus, your wax frame that you used to have, and say, well, no, it's a knowledge object, it's a data object. And one of the things I do with it is I have a sort of composable editing space, which might be an Illustrator picture. It might be the text, the article or the story that I'm writing. Or it might, in some cases, literally just be a confederation of data about all sorts of things, which as a whole comprise the knowledge object and describe itself. And then I think it frees you up. For instance, as somebody who's sort of, in a sense, is, as it were, the owner of a current file type, say, okay, I can reimagine, I can still do what I have today, but I can actually make it much more powerful because I put in this sort of environment. I can actually externalize much of the stuff that otherwise I've got to go into the app to get. I would say that the one fight you might get is the marketing might point out that you may sell fewer apps, fewer copies of the app. But I think that's not our fight. But I do think what we're usefully doing is perhaps giving people who are, in a sense, locked within a structural ghetto of their field to actually think, okay, I could do this a different way, and I could do it in a more informative way, give more affordances.
Yes. Ideally, this human body would ship with full broadcastable metadata. it may sell fewer apps, as you said.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It does.
No, I know. Fine. No, I agree with that. Right?
Yeah.
100%. So, as I think you all know, in Reader, you open up a PDF, you can assign different pages of visual meta yourself. So if we have a method where any kind of icon, of course, right now you have a little info box in the Finder, which is in this context pathetic. But if you can easily say, I got this great human body model, I'm going to run an AI on it to find out what's in it. And I'm going to put all of that into the metadata for that, which is my end user metadata, so that they may not have surfaced that stuff, but I know it's there. So I just stamp it on top. So it means I'm doing my other things. I know I can refer to that. So where this broadcast data is should be baked in by the author, but also put onable by the user, I feel. Chris, we kind of ran away with things there for a bit. I would really like it if you don't mind highlighting your previous point.
Sure. Let's see. So, let's see. Yeah, as far as abstraction of files, I mean, the idea here, of course, is that any given version of a file at any given time is something that would be, sort of snapshotted and referenced by hash. And then if we compose knowledge graphs using that, it makes it a lot easier to overlay. And then share, because there's no conflicts with names, obviously, if we're using hashes. So there's a kind of like what I discussed a few weeks ago, but I think there's like a probably low-hanging fruit, like MVP kind of version of what I talked about that seems worth implementing and might actually solve a lot of the problems we're talking about in one go.
There's an interesting thing actually that you're saying that makes me think is to ask ourselves how much of our notion of sort of versions is a legacy of computer coding rather than human use of files. So if you think of a sort of data object, well, which is its version? Because it could be versioning on a whole number of axes. And I don't, and again, it's very difficult in saying this. It sounds as though I'm trying to be iconoclastic, and I'm absolutely not. And the idea isn't not to tear down things we have, but it's being sort of sensitive to, are we extending our use of notions beyond their usable, their sort of useful envelope? We've done it pragmatically. So none of these things were sort of bad actors or us doing deliberately stupid things, but it's just that sometimes we take what we have and we walk it past its sensible endpoint simply because we didn't have another option. What is beginning to shine out for me in this is when now we have a lot more options, and so the question is to walk back and say, well, what things am I holding on to that I really don't need to, that I can still do all the things I do, but I can do other things as well. I guess is the gist of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Brandon, please go ahead, but I'm not sure if Andrew saw my comment because he dropped for a second. Andrew, in a minute, would you like to go through some of the feedback you got from the demo? Obviously, I did some of the demos as well, so I'll also do it. Is that cool?
Yeah, I'd love to go through that. And I didn't see your message. I must have dropped it just the wrong time.
No, she's coming to pick me up. Well, John is.
Oh, sorry. Mark was just saying he has to leave. Deanie and John are coming.
In about 5 minutes. So if I slip away, my apologies to all. Anyway, I don't want to interrupt anyone.
Okay. Brandl, please.
So I'm still on that kick of bundling information that you may or may not care about and what you do with it. And one of the things concretely that it would look like, not sort of setting this as homework for it, but if, for example, author actually wrote out not what the file is that you make with it, but what you did in author for the duration of your action over that file as something that has the ability to reference into the things that ultimately sort of end up in the file. But and all of the actions, so it might even go as far as having a dense mouse cursor log. But all of the sort of command tabs in and out of the application as a set of actions that you undertake. And likewise, other applications could do that, and the operating system could record the entirety of the actions there, or some other sort of dense exhaust, basically, of what you do. And then, if you want somebody to have all of the information about what somebody did on a whole computer versus what they did just in one application. So obviously you don't know author doesn't know what I did in Safari at the same time. But if somebody chooses to encode both, like to carry both of those files, then the information dovetails in terms of like I switched from, you can know easily that somebody switched out of author, and then the log of that somebody switched into Safari is able to take over, and having the ability to kind of reason about those things. One of the things that it means that files need to do is complain less about incomplete links and the inability to completely rehydrate a thing, to say like this is missing. It's no big deal. If you want to give it to me, I can tell you more about it. But I just so you know, I don't know about that thing. Rather than like, oh no, there's an incomplete link. What are you going to do? This file's broken. And the second thing is that it sort of transposes whether stuff is taking up space or not. Again, sort of wearing away that binary where it's like, well, while you've got the space, we'll use it, but you can be aware that this is relatively low profile, like low priority artifact in relation to the overall sort of scheme of things. And so, you can burn 200 gigabytes on just mouse trails if you want, but the computer will be able to make smart determinations. So, like, you're going to lose your mouse trails for the last 6 months if you want. It's no big deal, but if you for some reason really needed them, then just letting you know that if you want to save this file, you're going to have to make slightly different sort of policy decisions with relation to storage. I just think that's really interesting because there are these hard lines, these hard binaries of where we cut off what is encoded, what is a file, what were the relevant actions within the context of things. And surveillance capitalism has certainly determined that these implicit behavioral characteristics are of value to people. So people know how you scroll on Twitter, but you don't. And I've always been sort of struck by the asymmetry of that. There's a number of things that they don't know how you scroll on Twitter. I I I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you've managed to stop that, Fabian. But yeah, like I think that giving people the ability to do that themselves, giving them people the ability to kind of leverage those kinds of artifacts, and also giving people the other authors, other developers of stuff, the opportunity to consider sort of holistically what they might do with artifacts of this kind might give us more daisy disks and more um, easy tree transpose and or easy data transform and all of those kinds of tools because we know that there's more that we can do than manipulate these terminal formats and these binaries.
Yeah, Fabian, yes, but just really briefly on this point, I don't know if you guys know, but in Author, one of the default windows you can open or documents is called Ideas. That's where you write down your clever ideas over time, a little scrapbook. The notion of that in the near future, you should be able to, when you run a AI query, to have that as part of the prompt so it knows more about you. But this has to be entirely controlled by the user. I completely agree with you, Brandel. You should be able to spy on yourself, and you should be able to choose how to use that. When we all have local LLMs that don't go anywhere else, to be able to go through that treasure trove of context about you will be very helpful because it won't go to Zuckerberg, it'll go to you. Fabian, please.
Yes, so briefly, I put no as the icon in the sense that it's wrong. I'm sure it does, and it's even if it doesn't, it will because it is indeed aligned with the incentive. So, and it should be stopped. On going back a little bit, let's say on having the actual files, them being available or not, something serious and something a bit ridiculous, but I hope serious still. The serious part is the way I explicitly do it. I cheat. Says, for example, on the laptop I have with me when I travel, I have Wikipedia and Stack Overflow. So if I'm flying, if the connection is bad, I have all that. It is also available through the system, so you can access it in VR because it's using cubics. So you have the 80 gigabyte file for both, actually, Stack Overflow and Wikipedia, and you have content, so you can query it, etc. So it works, but I'm kind of cheating in the sense that explicitly, because I know I will be offline or in condition where it might be tricky, I download it manually. So I don't think that's, well, it works, but it's not great. And on the kind of joke aspect, but I hope serious, is I think one way to do this properly, to make that not explicit but implicit and working, is to going at Fraud's place, because his connection is terrible. So I would go there with the setup, and then it would randomly not work, and then I would then be able to see, is the system like resilient enough in order to, I don't know, handle caching, or as you said, for example, if it's not cached, well, at least warn the user in a way that it's not like the end of the world, and potentially have some way to, for example, just do the metadata or annotation. But I think basically being able to make sure it is usable in an environment that is the kind of challenge one would encounter. Like I was really thinking of, not right now, of course, because I'm chatting with you all, but to have the network connection, the NM-CLI on Linux, to randomly disconnect me as I do the thing. Because then you can really test, is it reliable enough? Can you keep on using the system in a way that is, even though it's kind of not deprecated, but you test the resilience in a way that you ensure it remains useful without having all the data. You're muted, Fraud, if you want to address the joke.
I briefly have to reply to some emails to people about the event and today. Chris, please go ahead, and then Fabian, excuse me. Then Andrew is ready to talk about some of the feedback he got from the demo. I'm still here. I'm just, yeah. Chris, you had your hand up, right, or not?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Andrew, did you want to go through some of the feedback?
Yeah, let's hope my connection holds on here. And hopefully my mic is not dreadful for you guys.
No, it's working well. Thanks.
Perfect. So I actually didn't get a ton of different feedback. I got two main things that stood out to me. Dismiss the little things that aren't relevant. One was, and Frode, you saw this as well. Some of the pages in the Future of Text volume were loading in blank on the network connection, and they worked fine locally. And I did manage to solve that that night because it was bothering me. So I went home, I did a bunch of testing on networks and whatnot. I think it was an AJAX call. If it interacts with a server that is at all restrictive, it'll throw an error, which blanks the page. Really weird edge case and shouldn't happen in most cases, but I wanted to fix that in case people are viewing our work through networks like that, which also happened to be the network of the symposium, which was unfortunate. But that got resolved already. The other big one was the hand mana menu, where when you select an option on the menu, there's no immediate response. And it was such an oversight that's like seems obvious. But I had people trying to use the mana menu to change settings. And besides like say toggle debug, which obviously changes something, a lot of the settings just do something in the background, and you have to kind of expect it to work. There's no response to the user. So I think it's very obvious that I need to put some little trigger in there, even as simple as like a little flash from your finger when you activate it. Which,
quite elegant.
that being said, that's a really simple thing to add. Yeah. So those were the two main ones, and one's already fixed, and the other is easy to implement.
Sorry, I kind of forgot how bad it is with Zoom when you're trying to say something additional and it's overtalk. I apologize. But a little
no, you're all good.
fingers would be super cool. Fabian.
Yeah, it's also something that I think we need to address. Let's say the visual, or not necessarily visual, but always providing feedback. So in general, I think it's a good rule, but I think in here an environment that is weird. I don't mean in a pejorative way. It's just like it is strange for people because it's new. And they don't know if they themselves did something wrong. Like I had a demo where somebody told me, I don't know how to pinch, or I'm not used to hand tracking in VR. So they basically assume they're going to do it incorrectly. Most of the time they don't. They do it properly, but because the system in itself is so strange, it kind of put them in a tense position where normally they might be able to explore more or be a bit more curious, or so it makes for a behavior that is maybe less conductive to trying something new for them. And I say them, like me included. It's like when I tried a new VR demo and a demo that is actually again new, not just like, I don't know, the typical let's say Beat Saber, something we're used to. The feedback and really any kind of feedback makes such a huge difference, because also it means if something goes kind of wrong, which as you highlighted, and it always does a little bit, then at least, or for us, when we're side by side with the person trying the demo, we can also help them, or it can debug. But like feedback, that very inelegantly also, that's why I had the console, and we had discussion about this. But at least if something go wrong and there is a big red line, people turn around, they see, hey, there is something there. So it gives them also some kind of optional inspectability. But I think, yeah, any kind of feedback, and I think this not to Andrew specifically. I need to do that more. I think we all need, in those cases, need to do that more.
I don't like feedback. I like praise. I think that's a little bit human, and that's to underscore how right you are, Fabienne. And I'm wondering, especially since this is an official, so to speak, research project, maybe we should do something I think you suggested the other day, which is to maybe make even an app to capture this feedback, actionable feedback, as Carl so nicely introduced to the community. But I have a question for both Andrew and Fabienne then. So far, the feedback, is it primarily during or after you get the important bits?
What do you mean by the important bit?
Yeah, and more likely to get the
Because for each user, that's a little bit different.
Okay. That makes
Sorry.
No, that's just the world, because I'm just wondering, we could even make a really basic iPhone app that records audio, with permission if they want to do that, the whole thing. And then we have one audio file per user, write down their name or pseudonym or whatever. Can also have some fields where we do, Mark, what's that testing we often did for? Likert scale, where we basically asked, was it easy to understand? Did you feel it could, those kinds of questions, but also as at least one of them, that's the opposites, where the number to the right is actually the negative, which kind of to catch you out, make sure you're actually filling in the form and not just sliding the damn thing, right? Those kinds of things, and have it feed back into a system would be very useful. Yeah, you say post-it notes, online form, email, audio, video. Yeah, but let's try to make it as little work as possible. I mean, to get an iOS app done is super, super simple if we want to do
So
that.
the most simple and it's the highest quality, in my opinion, is what happened yesterday, namely person in front of you, positive environment, people who are there happy to do this, and direct dialogue with the person. Or even more, like if there are more people around, they also bounce idea with each other. When it's generally positive, I think that's the best. But then we can also, why I put post-it notes, and I had colorful post-it notes around me, is because I think a lot of people associate that with something that is a bit more creative and open. Because an online form, it's kind of constraining, it's kind of boring and scary, and a lot of people are like, yeah, I'll fill the form. Nobody ever does this.
No, I don't
So
mean that. What I mean is literally, we have an app on our device that we, either do the audio recording or we do that. We don't make them go to a web page, or we don't make them do it. We do it for them.
Oh, I see. I see what you're
Sure.
saying. Oh, sorry, Fabian. I would say I don't see personally the point in that if we're already there. Like if this is on our device and we're having them demo it, then we're already getting the feedback live, which is way more valuable than just some entry points. I could see a form being useful if we have to offload the testing and have them do it without us.
What I'm thinking about is, so both Mark and me had to do different kinds of testing for our PhD. A lot of it was kind of silly, some of it useful. What I mean is, I could imagine, especially Fabienne and me, we're having lunch in Brussels and working all morning or having coffee. It's all very lovely. And then we see someone looking at the device, they come over and we have an impromptu session. It's really nice. But then how do we write that up in a coherent manner? So it'll go in, so it can be measured over time. Anyway, Mark is leaving, so I'm going to follow him out the door. So you get to say hi to hi and bye.
You ready? Oh,
Hello and goodbye for the future texting.
okay.
The team wants to say hello.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Oh my God, you're driving your
Morning,
car?
Denny.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? Is that okay? Hi. Hi,
Hello,
everybody.
hello. Good morning.
Randall, where are you right now? Are you still in town?
Let's see if Ricky
No, I'm back home.
You're still in town? I can't hear you.
No, I'm back home.
Oh, you're back home. Okay. Well, I hope you had a good trip. Andrew, I'm going to be on campus today with Mark. If you need anything, just text me, okay?
Yeah, I'm planning on coming by actually a little bit later.
Oh, good. Okay, that's great. And Fabienne, I'll see you, huh?
I hope so, yes.
Okay.
Anyway,
Right.
did you see the email from Josh?
I didn't.
He got feedback from participants that it was one of the best events they've been to in a very long time.
Oh, good. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. No, I have been working on payroll.
Yeah, that's so much sexier. Okay. Anyway, we'll catch up later. You guys do the things in the lab and we will do the
All
factory.
right, have fun. Okay. And John said dinner tomorrow night. Yes, it's fine. And there's a sushi place. If you're into sushi.
Proper one, because I took you to a really bad.
Very good sushi place. Yeah. Okay. All right.
I won't delay you. Enjoy the lab. That's wonderful. Thank you, Dini. Bye, guys. Right. Laptop cam, not so convenient. Are you all there? Yeah, you are. Okay, yeah, so I'm so sorry. We got a bit lost there with leaving. Wouldn't it benefit us if having the notes taken takes less effort?
Yeah, so for example, I was thinking that you, for example, Frode, sit next to me while we do the demo, but it has to be, I think the most important, and I'm going to sound like all fizzy fuzzy or whatnot, is that people who try the demo feel good. Like
Yeah.
they have to be, again, because it's weird. Like we're showing them surprising stuff, hopefully, something that does challenge the way they think, etc. And if we start to have like two people and then a notepad and a form and all, some people might be really into this. Like, oh, my usage is precious. They actually really care. And some for sure will freak out, or they will be like, oh, am I being evaluated or something? So I think to me the most important is, and I think it went quite well yesterday, is that people are comfortable and are ready to try. Now, if the person is like super, again, comfortable, if not only I can discuss with them, but there is a way to capture more, because for example, Fraud, you're by the side and you're like jolting down notes or taking photos or even live video, or not live, but a recorded video. And if they agree to it, it can be posted. It is even nicer, but to me, it remains secondary to them being comfortable to be able to try properly.
Okay, so entirely reasonable, especially the thing about people feeling they're being tested rather than they are testing. A very good point. So what I suggest we just do then is just agree on some data that we want every time. One of them would be, did you feel you could get work done in such an environment? And B, was there anything you really want to change or something like that? I'm not saying we have to do it now, but the reason is when we tabulate the data later, there's some similarities in addition to people coming up with their individual things. That's all. I'm very happy to have an document ready just for this, by the way. Sorry, this sofa is so comfortable. I kind of fall into it and become a squished thing.
I wasn't. I'm. I just searched online. They are public things, so people outside of Apple know about them. But have you ever heard of sysdiagnose and AR trace, Ariadne traces, and sysdiagnose files? Spin dump files are another kind. Apple systems all have the ability to create incredibly verbose diagnostic files that are really, really useful for some people for some reasons. And system logging in general is like it's made in a way that is supposed to be like efficient enough that it that people sort of just add logs and then you need to sort of subscribe to different streams in order to be able to do it. And it means that the composite log of everything that the file the system has the ability to dump out is just titanic. Um, But what that means is that there's a really well-established tradition of people dropping out things just in case they're useful. Um, and they're like sometimes hundreds of megabytes to gigabytes, but it's really interesting that the systems have the ability to do that logging. So I think that it would be interesting to um, pending the feasibility of being able to encode that data to have those action logs and those state logs of the applications as you build them available for being able to capture as well, to the extent that you can do that. So like it's probably beyond the pale to record audio, but pose data and things like that. That's something that could go into a log like that if you choose to, and things like that, or having a cadence of that information such that it's the first thing to go if you start to encounter any performance issues, but you have the ability to record it in the event that you want to be able to kind of recover information about what happened for a person at a time, and things like that. So yeah, just another sort of encouragement to look into saving sort of sidecar information related to, but not intrinsic to, the sort of the operation of an application at a time.
Yeah, very nice. Andrew, you're working today. You're not doing factory, you said, right? That's a shame, but could be fun.
I couldn't hear what you said there.
Yeah. Fabian, you're coming
You
to
could,
the Briar Rose Inn at some point this morning, right?
Yes, I sent you some top secret information in the chat about that.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Yes, you will be here. Cool. I think only Ken and Jesse, in addition. This is fine, tiny group. I don't think he will mind. He seemed more concerned that it'd be too many people. Well, I mean, it's been a useful discussion today. I don't know how much more we should talk with such a small group, so there'll be more for them to catch up with. But I think we have agreed that files are great. How systems can dig into files, relate to files, and what happens when you have something that's basically not a file in the same space. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with knowledge you're working with? And this is stuff that we learned, Andrew, because of what you've been doing. We talked so much about foreground, background, and for what we had to do with our constraints, it became basically different levels of foreground. That's all we have. But that's an implementation. That's not what we learned. So it's been very, very fruitful. So we can continue those notions of, what does distance mean in an instantly accessible environment? We can pretend it means on the other side of the room, but is that really the kind of distance we are referring to? So it'll be good. Also, Fabian, I really, really want to start talking to you about the look of the icons, just stylistically. So we kind of develop in the beginning, all of us, a bit of a house style, which obviously should be changeable, but to have a little bit of a, not just wireframe, which I know, of course, is only one rendering style and what you're doing. And I'm going to keep talking now for a while just to really annoy you, because I don't know.
So anyway, I'll just speak over you, as we know that's a proper way now to interact. Not a problem. So jokes aside, I have my little electronic notebook next to me, so that I don't have to think. I can see what people have told me while trying. And one of them was basically icons are too sharp. Like they literally to me, it looks like I'm going to cut my fingers or something like this. It's absolutely not how I feel, which is absolutely irrelevant. Like if they feel that for them it's going to be too sharp, I want to hear that. I, to be also upfront, don't really care as much because to me it doesn't feel bad. But again, if it's a recurring feedback, I need to hear it, and I think we need to find a solution for it. Because I don't care about this so much, like I put in place the minimum technical way to do it, but then there need to be actual suggestions on how. Like for example, I have I think called GXR style.json, which is a different color scheme so that it can be adapted, like basically light and dark mode, just kind of for not for the fun of it, but as a way to say yes, that can be done. It would be better if somebody who actually know what they're talking about and care about it, namely not me, were to do the actual content, for example, the scheme itself, like which color goes to what. And that does include indeed just the shape of the icons or the files or the thing that you put the icon on top of. So I absolutely hear that, both, as you said right now, and from people who did tests. I also have to be upfront that that's not what gets me going, because I'm not really dedicated to this. But if somebody were to give me either a sketch on what a better solution would be, or a 3D model of it, or anything to go with it, I would very happily add that. And I do think it's important, because the same way that people need to feel comfortable to try a proper demo in order to give useful feedback, if they feel that the file is going to virtually cut their virtual hand, that's not a great way to start to give feedback. So I absolutely want to move on this. So whenever there is something, it's also very briefly, Frode, when you mentioned before, could they be, I don't remember how you formulated it, but whenever you have a visual idea, please do sketch it. Just go for it. There is, and as you see, like, I can barely sketch on my notebook to save my life. It looks ugly, but I think conceptually it's already, in a lot of cases, better than quote unquote just words when we're talking about like 2D or 3D things. So please, I invite you to do it whenever, always.
I think we agree on this, and it's just important to build on this. For me, this is hugely important because as in advertising, we have concepts, we have focus groups, we have data, we have all these things, but the only thing the consumer actually ever sees is the advertisement. It is only ever the visual thing. And I'm not talking about, marketing where people walk up to you and stuff like that. I'm talking about ads. Same with an interface. The only thing people ever see is the interface. And of course, what they experience is the interface plus interaction. So that the infrastructure, the data has to be there. But and I'm glad to hear what you said, Fabian. So we're most certainly not arguing, but I feel that the interface is important, not just in terms of a brand, not just in terms of a style. It's similar to typography. As an example would be the word stop in a handwritten font is very different from a bold font with a red background, on a stop sign. So that's why we fluidly need to try to, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Is very much a part of the environment. So we'll have to, it's not like, it also needs to be tested, is what I'm trying to say. Yes, Fabian.
Yeah, just it's not to insist, it's to share a bit more the way I see things. My perspective on this is, I don't know, I imagine if I mentioned it before, but a lot of you are probably already familiar with the Japanese concept of ikigai. Like, I'll put in the chat, otherwise you'll have a wonderful day checking it up. But it's basically also what I have in mind when I say things like this. I don't want to sound dismissive, is very pragmatically, where can I actually help? And some of it is like the, how do you say, the less visible part of, yeah, I do the very rough prototype because others can't or don't want to focus on this. So it means I'm very happy to interface with things that genuinely make it aesthetically more pleasing, or in shape and way that are more adapted to what users expect and can understand. It's just not something that I feel that I can help most with. That's why I say this. I don't want to sound like I'm relegating this. It's just that I need an interface, a person as an interface to that skill that I'd rather not do myself, because I don't think it's in my skill set where can I help most.
Arrogantly, because of my experience, I feel it is in my skill set. And I feel it's also my skill set to admit that I'm very often wrong. But when I'm developing author, that means, oh no, we do it different. And the programmers get really annoyed. No, do it different. I got to test it to feel it. So, that's an issue. So we do need some real discussions around keynote presentations or similar to get the right feel, the right emotion for walking in these things. But like everything here, it has to be led by those who are passionate, but it has to have a firm dialogue and community involvement to shape it. So I think it'll be all right. But you can't expect me to say, no, that gray needs to be 2% darker. That'll happen. No, okay. The thing is also, when you are in the headset, things look different. I know that's obvious, but it also means that if you make design decisions in a flat environment or even in a different kind of display, and then you view it in the headset, I mean, just poor Andrew has been dealing with it so many times this year. we do something and it looks fine, and then he implements it and it's not fine. It's quite literally a different way of experiencing it.
So, Fabian, the one of the main things that would be really useful is to use either a rounded rect as the sort of geometry system, or a two-step bevel extrusion, so that you have the ability to configure things like border radius on sort of the major axis like that, as well as on the minor axis like this, to have the number of bevel segments and the size of it, and to be able to attenuate and modify those things as they are properties of a sign, an icon that is representative of things. And then you can use those to sort of convey multiple meanings about the sort of the completeness or the function of something, so that you have, things that are this shape that mean something, versus others. And yeah, like, it's relatively straightforward to have the thickness of something. So a system like this has the ability to go fluidly from spherical to anything else. So you make this thing thick enough, we make it
I agree.
circular on that axis.
I agree with what you're saying, Brandel, in terms of experience for what is. I think we need to be very, very careful for what should be. I think we have an opportunity to try, and I'm not sure how at all, to give the impression when you're XR that you're not seeing an icon, you're seeing a small version of the thing itself. And I have no idea what that means. But when I saw what Fabian was doing now, which was really nice to see that live, is the icons in Vision Pro. And we don't want to look, right? Of course, Fabian, that's not what you were intentionally doing, but when you lift a PDF, it probably should have sharp corners because that is actually a PDF. But for all these other things, like if it's just a text document, oh, well, that was Brandel. Oh, okay, great. And yeah, it was Blender, but I thought it was Fabian. Okay. No, Brandel, yeah, that was really nice to see. And those are the types of things we need to experiment with, because, what does it mean to see a note? We even have to design a typeface, right? A note should be different from a label. All of these things should be glanceable. That's the term I used in the 90s, glanceable. You should look at it and just know what it is without being constrained with the kind of icons we have today. Over.
Totally. And the idea is that you have information that can be conveyed through that dimensionality, and that's the one that's sort of most ready to hand in terms of being able to summarize and characterize the distinction between things. And so I agree that it would be good to have information in there, but there's a difference between the information that's legible at these varying scales. But all I meant to say, Fabian, by way of showing that sort of set of geometry operations, is that's a pretty good and ready to hand thing. And so if you can leverage either bevel geometries, extrude geometries, or rounded rectangles as a basis for those things, then that means that they're ready to be able to kind of accept those semantic sort of, yeah, or nine slicing, exactly, have the ability to convey that information at such time as somebody has a thing to say with it.
Yeah, so two quick things. First, yes, and to the point that the night slicing is something that, because of my excitement and limited hours of sleep, I booked Mark a couple of hours ago before the meeting. So it's indeed absolutely what I have in mind. I want indeed to make it as how do you say? Flexible as possible, so that it can indeed adapt. It's not like just boom, here is a 3D model and we're done with it. I think especially for this kind of geometry. So yes, 100%. One thing also, I can't find it back because Musk broke Twitter and other things, so there is no search function. But I have a demo. So now in the whole system right now, based also on Brett Victor's and the principle of faster feedback, because Frode, you were mentioning, 5% gray, and in the headset it's not the same as 100. Absolutely, that's also why we need to put the headset. Like, we can talk about it in practice. When we do try the thing, we need to try the thing, and to follow Brett Victor's advice on the more principle rather. we need to try, and we need to try faster. And that's why the whole naming convention I have, which is .live, whatever file name, and .extension, is that you do live reloading, basically. So everything stays there except the new thing you save. So if you now export the GLB with .live in it, it's going to reload, and you're going to have the new version of it. So why I'm saying there, Fraud, is that the point is, ideally, you don't annoy me with a 5% lighter or darker, or you don't very nicely contribute to this with me live, is you do it yourself, and you evaluate right away, and you see like instantly if it's better or worse or whatnot. The system there is done for that. Like, having it live is because indeed it's tricky, and you want to optimize those back and forth in a way that is like we're exploring the landscape of possibility, and if we do it efficiently, we go further, basically.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, with my own setup, I want to be able to, I just, now that all this is over, I can probably set up Xcode on my own computer and do a online repository with my coders, so that when it comes to changing a label and stuff, I can do it myself. So yeah, have access to the team to live change some of the basic variables is really important. I also will try to encourage the wider community and RT kind of people to come up with visualizations of environments, and I will call it, for this context, knowledge objects, which are very different from what we have today. And absolutely, we do not have to build all of them, but we need to really get out of the rut of how do we make the rectangle better, which is of course not the core of what you were saying. It was a detail, but you know, it's a whole new world. It's got to look like one. And in our last 10 minutes today, I think next Monday we will spend a little bit of time on getting a shape of next year. You know, how we're going to do our minutes, what kind of prompts we're going to use, what kind of people we'll invite, you know, the prompts for our summaries or not. Basically try before December to go through the specifics of how we're going to work, so we don't waste any time with that in January and even in December. So yeah, it's all good. I look forward to seeing Dini and John for dinner at their house tomorrow. So that is, of course, in this context, relatively significant. So that's good. And yeah, we have 10 minutes left. So Fabian, you're going to hop in a taxi and come here 11, 12, something like that, right?
Yeah, we're going to try that.
Yeah, cool. We'll have a basic lunch, and then we'll go off for to look at the substrates of this world. It's kind of incredible to be able to do that. I wish the rest of you had the opportunity to join us, of course. Anything else in closing today with a reduced crew?
In terms of my, sorry, go for it, Ben.
No, I got nothing. Sorry. I was just going to say I have nothing to say, which was silly of me.
So I have silly things to say too, so that's no worries. I'll do a little preview. Let's see if you can still see me. Yes, that's my face. Up. So one of in terms of going back, it's okay if you can't really see it. I'll sketch a bit more. And I'll describe. But the idea was, in terms of going back with the instant feedback aspect to it, for the system, like it's for you, Fraud, but it's for everybody else. That's also anybody at whatever level, if it's in terms of designer or programmer. And in terms of year 2 and authoring the content, the very basic idea I had, again, in the middle of the night, so not the high quality, but I think it's going somewhere, which is basically, again, not removing the headset so that you can have more instant feedback, is basically most of those objects that are interactable, including the interface itself, wrapping them in bounding boxes, making the bounding box grubbable, and having the visual link between their identifier, for example, the ID or the class or a hash or whatever to show the two, and then be able basically to do the authoring of the content and the interface related to that content from the headset directly. And I think technically it's probably not as hard as was, at least on a naive sense, as I initially thought. So I think there is especially now with having the post-it notes and the text, so you can have the label linked to it and the post-it note relate to each other with the visible label. On my honestly very naive, again, middle of the night and having just one coffee now, it looks like 5 lines of code. So it's probably totally wrong, but I think in principle it looks very at least feasible. So I'm pretty excited by this. Beside the great discussion of the weekend and the demo, if that's a potential path forward, to me that's already super valuable.
Cool. I just want to say something else, and please listen carefully in the sense that it may sound wrong for the first half. And I don't want to stress anyone. I think it will be very important to out Apple. What I mean by that is one thing Apple does really well, amongst many other things, is delightful interface experiences. Like it's, if someone mocks up the next version of what some Apple thing will be, it'll always be based on the previous, and they jump into something completely different. An experience here is the Apple Pencil on an iPad now. It has a shadow, a rendered shadow, that kind of stuff, right? It's weird. And Fabian, the reason I'm telling you nicely to not take it too seriously, what I mean is I'm not saying we should spend that amount of resources and time on doing that kind of interface refinement, right? But I do think that it is really, really important that we remind ourselves quite often, again, that number one, people only see the interface. So we cannot look like this is just a tech demo. When we use bounding boxes to show a selection of items, I think that is really important. But I was very inspired by what Andrew said. Andrew, you're still here, right? I hope Andrew can hear me.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Cool. Because when you said that with the mana menu, if something visible doesn't happen, do some kind of a spark. I think that is actually brilliant because it is a bit of a wow. It is visceral. It shows a result, right? I think we need to really look at how we can do things like that. So when we're talking about selecting, and over whatever meal we had yesterday, Fabian was talking about, it seems to be reasonable to select items that aren't necessarily in the same volume originally, but select them and do a thing with them, copy them, move them, right? That is an amazing capability. And again, I'm not saying this is what's planned, but if that was just a wireframe with little boxes in the corners and stuff, that might give the wrong feeling to the audience, because don't forget, half of what we're doing for Sloan is theater. It is an emotional awakening that this can be an incredible working space. The other half is capability. So if we can think of an Andrew level spark, something that cool to show you've selected these items and they don't just glow necessarily, we're going to make some real progress, because as I keep saying, we need to dream again. And that means we need to shake up our own thinking of what does this look like? So that's why I'm so glad, Fabian, you're on board with the interface environment visual testing, despite not being your core wheelhouse or whatever the expression is. Oh, Andrew's dropped again. Oh, well, he'll be in the record. But yeah. Yeah, so this is very exciting. Very, very exciting. And it's a shame Andrew's not here right now, because I don't think, oh, here he is. Andrew, please talk when you can hear us. Can you hear us, Andrew?
I just you were talking to me. I couldn't hear anything.
Okay. Two things, Andrew. First of all, and
What
this will be in the recorded transcript if you can't hear it. First of all, I don't think you understand how important your work for year one really has been. The levels of learning we've done with what you have built has been absolutely tremendous. the way we talk how to get to the next step now is based pretty much entirely on that. That's one thing. Secondly, your mana menu Spark idea, I think, is genius because it shows a different way of thinking for the visual experience of the theater that the user will come into and say, this is different. This is not a computer in space. This is entirely different. So we need to keep thinking along those lines of literal and analogous sparks in space. And on that note, let's wrap it up. Any final comments for today? Look forward to Wednesday. I may very well be in the air, but I will most definitely be here on Monday. So, no, Wednesday will be fine. Wednesday morning, I'm here. Yes, look forward to it. Look forward to that. Here's a little thing. I texted Deanie and Rob a special video of them with the expectation of them viewing in the headsets. And Rob just replied, now, unfortunately, I've been able to figure out why this text does not appear on the headsets. So that's the kind of interesting interface issue. Why doesn't he see it there?
Sometimes you have to download it and then so you can't see it from messages. They need to depending on where they're in. If they're in mail, then it's probably not going to preview very well. Yeah, those are plumbing issues that we're working out.
That'll be good when that's done. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
And see you sooner or later. Bye.
Take care all. Bye-bye.